Just the other day, we were doing a fall cleanup, and we have a barn in our yard, and that's traditionally where my boat has lived. But this last summer, my son has been restoring a car and has worked hours and hours on painting it and sanding it and repainting it and touching it up and resanding it and doing the clear coat and then starting all over. And we were moving the car out because he has passed his deadline of having the paint booth in our barn, and my boat is now taking its rightful place back before the winter. Now, my son was looking at his car and he said, I should have spent more time doing this. And I thought, no, you have spent hours and hours painting this car. And in my opinion, what he needed to do was to let go of the perfectionism, and that this is a practice car. It does not need to be perfect. And he has several thousand hours and several $1,000s yet to put into this car to even get it running. So if you can sympathize with me or relate with him or I in projects that take much longer, yet don't turn out like you want them to, and you might be dealing with perfectionism, this episode is for you. Welcome to Burnout Solutions, a podcast designed to help high achievers and healthcare professionals understand stress and how it can lead to burnout. Together, we'll explore how your brain and nervous system naturally work and why they sometimes hold you back, and how to overcome those challenges to fully enjoy the success you've worked so hard to create. I am your host, Mona Tippett, registered nurse, burnout coach, and resiliency educator. Hello there, and welcome back to the podcast. Today, we are talking about perfectionism, and I have so much to say about this. I think this is the first of many podcasts that I will probably do on perfectionism. I have lived it, I still do, but I have learned to manage it a lot better than I used to. And I wanted to talk today just about what it looks like. A lot of my clients could be perfectionists. If you don't understand perfectionists, this is a great podcast to listen to. And this is just my initial thoughts on perfectionism and how it's showed up in my life and how I've learned to work with it differently, and how it drives us and how it can cause our stress and burnout. And I'm hoping to give you some keys to how to keep your ambition and your perfectionism without burning out. And I am going to share a lot of stories from my life because I have so many experiences with this. So I wanted to start out with a story. Several years ago, I remember I was nursing a baby, so probably 2013. And I decided to take charge of the school carnival. My oldest was in first grade. And over the summer, I literally spent weeks preparing for this PTA carnival. It was Wild West night. And I was new, I was taking it on, and I wanted it to be perfect. I spent days, scanning Pinterest and getting ideas and looking at websites for games. And my husband made this amazing reverse dunk tank because a dunk tank wasn't allowed in our school district. So this was a reverse dunk tank. And so he made this door, and it had this little flap door, and you threw a ball at the door and it knocked off a water bottle, which pulled a toilet flusher mechanism, which dumped water on a person sitting in a chair. And I had to make this and paint this. And I wanted the tablecloths perfect. And like I said, the theme was Wild West night. So it was Western. And so I wanted red and white checkered tablecloths, and I wanted all these easy ups with lights hanging down. And in my mind, it was like perfect and wonderful. And everyone there was going to be dressed in the theme, and the food and the cakewalk cupcakes had to be to the theme. And I just, imagined all these kids and families just having the best time ever. And this was just picture perfect. And it was going to be the best carnival the school has ever had, right? Now, It was actually pretty good, but it was not what I envisioned. And by the time the night of the carnival came, because I was super hyper independent back then, I actually didn't really have a committee. I had asked people to help, but throughout the summer, they just didn't help. And so I pretty much planned this carnival on my own. So fast forward, the night of the carnival, I was sleep deprived. My back hurts, which guess what? My back actually hurts when I have stressful events. I was just a stressed out wreck. And that night I learned and I realized that guess what? Kindergartners don't care what the color the tablecloths are. They don't care that all of the signs were remade and perfectly themed and they were super cute and laminated and they didn't notice how great the cookies were and that they were all Western themed. And I realized that myself doing a 25-person job was pretty unrealistic. And that night, I learned a powerful lesson about just learning to let go of some things. And if you can relate to this, great. If you can't, that's also great. We're going to talk about how it takes all people to make this world go round. But that's kind of the theme today is how to embrace your perfectionism without letting it consume you and how you can hold on to your drive, but you can let go when you need to, and you don't need to be in total control of everything. Some of my thoughts come from a book called The Perfectionist's Guide to Losing Control by Catherine Morgan Schaeffler. And I read a lot of books on perfectionism, but this one was really good. So one thing that I've been thinking about that she actually points out is that most of us have been told that perfectionism is bad and we need to get over it. Even my mom has told me it just is so annoying that for you, everything has to be just right. And my mother-in-law will say, I can't even look at your list of things to do without feeling tired. And I have been told these things my whole life. Stop being such a perfectionist. Done is better than perfect. Shoot for B- work. Just embrace imperfectionism. Brene Brown has a book called The Gift of Imperfectionism. And I've read that. And I'm going to talk a little bit about it today also. But all of those messages can make us feel like there's something wrong with these traits. And I'm going to argue that these traits of perfectionism or high achieving or being ambitious are the exact traits that have helped us succeed. I coach a lot of high achievers. I coach a lot of people who have been the top of their class, who have stayed up late, who have burned candles at both ends, who, because of these personality traits that they have created this amazing life. And I believe that there's nothing wrong with that. And I myself have even said, I am a recovering perfectionist, but I want to reframe it even differently that perfectionism isn't something that you need to get rid of. There's nothing wrong with you being a perfectionist. You don't have to recover from it. It's not a disease. It's not something that we need to change. It's not a flaw. It can be a gift. Being a perfectionist can be your devotion turned up a little bit too high. However, it's your love for doing things well. It's your desire to contribute and to create. And this podcast is one place in my life where I for sure have given up control and have trained myself to be okay with imperfect. But I actually really like doing well. There are people in my very inner circle that it drives me crazy. I'm like, why aren't you trying? Why don't you care about this? Why don't you want to go above and beyond? Why don't you want to try and see what you can become? And I would ask, both my mother and mother-in-law. I'm like, well, why are you okay with status quo? Like, what is it about just being that is okay for you? And this is where I have grown a lot and I have learned to understand that there is neither right nor wrong. If you are ambitious and an overachiever, that's totally fine. If you're not, that's also totally fine. And I have learned to understand that the people who are okay with, in air quotes, doing nothing or okay with the status quo is actually a good thing. And Eckhart Tolle actually calls these people frequency holders. And frequency holders are just that. They are people who are not constantly pushing themselves. Maybe they really do believe that they are perfectly lovable and whole just as they are, which perfectionists do get caught in this trap that I need to perform. I need to overachieve to prove my value. And I think it's refreshing that those people don't have that belief and really do know that they are perfectly whole. They're not constantly pushing themselves and burning themselves out. And the beauty of these frequency holders, especially for perfectionists, is that they hold the place and they offer stability in the world where they maintain the status quo, which is really good for us because now we know where we need to jump off of. Now we know what is above and beyond, because if everybody was trying to go above and beyond, there'd be way too much competition in the world and we would drive each other crazy, right? Everyone would be trying to be the best and the top and break limits and push themselves and try the latest and the greatest, which I think we have enough of that in the world already. So I have really learned to appreciate the people who don't like to work as much as I do and are okay with watching TV and enjoy their hobbies and can just sit and be by themselves or with other people, but they are okay just doing the same thing over and over again and just are calm and confident in themselves. Some of these people are depressed, and that is totally different. But I really do admire people who are okay with just being. So I have come far and have learned to appreciate that. So let's be grateful for those people. I've also have come to learn more deeply that we have been given the choice to create. And there's not a right way or a wrong way. There's just a choice. And we get to choose to be who we are. We get to choose to create the life that we want. And some of those choices are through choices of omission, where we don't choose things, where we just see what's going to play out. And I really have a hard time being that person. I like to make choices of commission or with intention. I want to choose purposefully and not just let things be as is. So the world works both ways. And regardless of how you are, we can learn to appreciate each other and our strengths. And I really do believe that high achieving and being a perfectionist can be a trait, but it can also be used too much and can cause us stress and burn us out. And the challenge comes when we use perfectionism to control everything around us or shield us from discomfort. And that's when it can become heavy, when it burns us out, when our nervous system gets into distress. And that's when it leads to stress and exhaustion. So when we think of perfectionism and perfectionists, we often think that they need life or their thoughts or things in their life to be different before they can be happy. And it's hard to feel happy unless we can change those things. And we do that in order to avoid failure or shame, or we are driven to excel in some things that might hurt ourselves or other people in the process. One thing I've also seen with a lot of my clients and myself is that perfectionists want things right. And they can criticize themselves. Most perfectionists have a very loud inner critic, and we criticize ourselves and others in an attempt to control the situation and other people. We want to control our environment so that we think if everything outside of us is perfect and right, then I can feel right inside. And we are not really pulled towards a goal, but we are running away from failure and shame. And when you run away from failure and shame, that is when you are in distress and living in fight or flight. So let's just tweak that thought a little bit, that the goal isn't to stop being a perfectionist, but it's to partner with your perfectionism differently. Our perfectionism is actually trying to help us. We want it to fuel excellence and our ambition without controlling every single moment, without exhausting our body and our mind. And I like to think of perfectionism like a fire or a torch. It can light up your path or it can burn you if it's not tended to carefully. So, our work is learning to harness it and have it work for you and not fight it and let it work against you. So, in this book, she talks about 5 types of perfectionists, and I'm going to list them and see if you can recognize yourself in any of those. And then I'm going to just give some examples of how I've seen these types of perfectionism lead to burnout. So, the first type of perfectionist is a classic perfectionist. These people love order, control, and checking off boxes. The second is the intense perfectionist. These people are high energy, all in. They can't switch off. They're always going, going, going. The Parisian perfectionist is focused on relationships, harmony, and approval of others. That's a big thing. Is they want everyone around them to be safe and happy and content. The fourth is the procrastinator perfectionist, and they want everything perfect before they start. They have a huge fear of failure. And then the fifth is the messy perfectionist. These people have big ideas, creative energy. They often start really strong, but then they kind of fizzle out and they have a hard time following through. Okay, so let's talk about each of these types of perfectionism and how they can lead to burnout and stress, and maybe an example. So, back to the first one, the classic perfectionist. So, again, they are driven, organized, disciplined. They thrive on control and order. If they had a motto, it would be, if I could plan it perfectly, I can prevent problems. Now, I already gave this example of the PTA carnival. This for sure I could relate with. And we're going to talk about how it can be a two-edged sword and how it can lead to burnout. So often these people carry a constant mental to-do list, and they just think that if they work just a little bit harder, they'll feel at peace. But the peace never comes. I have been there. I have felt this. They struggle to delegate because no one does it quite right. I remember thinking this so many times. I think I might as well just do it myself because it's not going to be done right. And one example I thought of just the other day, we were making dinner. We had a bunch of people coming over on a Sunday. And I asked my son to cut the potatoes. I was making oven roasted potatoes. And I said specifically, I want them to be all equal. And I came back and he was cutting them as an 18-year-old boy who doesn't care about potatoes was cutting them. And I was like, no, those are not equal. And we kind of got in an argument. And he's like, if you want them done right, you just need to do it yourself. And I thought, no, I want you to do it right. And he said, why does it matter? Why does it care? Now, does it really matter? Well, it did to me because I don't like eating potatoes where one's crunchy and one's overcooked. But in the long term and in the scheme of life, does it matter? No, not really. But I wanted him to cut the potatoes like I wanted them cut. So this can cause a nervous system to be in chronic sympathetic activation where you're constantly on guard, where you're constantly thinking, I just need to do this because I can't count on anybody. I need to be more driven, more organized, more disciplined. I need to control everything around me so that everything can go well and I will feel fine, right? Because if someone's going to eat a potato that's undercooked, I guess the world's going to end, right? Like it doesn't make sense, yet somehow it does in my brain. So there's my example with the classic perfectionist and how wanting order and being organized and disciplined can burn you out. Now, if you follow me on anything, I like to teach how you don't work harder, you just work differently. So here is a reframe that you could use in a classic perfectionist situation, or if you tend to be a classic perfectionist, just know that it's okay to have incredible standards, but the key to learning is that there can be order and it can exist without over control, without planning every single tiny detail and every single minute by minute, right? That's where burnout and stress start. Okay, the next is the intense perfectionist. I also related to this one. So their core traits are they're passionate, they're high energy, they go all in, and they have a hard time switching off. Maybe if they had a motto, it would say something like, if I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it the best. I'm going to do it the right way. And right way is in air quotes. This can lead to stress and burnout because people like this set impossible standards and they can feel a deep disappointment if things aren't exceptional. They can feel a deep disappointment if things don't turn out like they planned. It's also hard for these people to rest because our brain keeps scanning for the next improvement. Our brain is actually set to be on hypercritical mode, looking for things that are wrong or could be improved. And burnout can come from emotional overinvestment because we're always turning the dial to 10. We're always looking for ways to improve. We're always on the alert. Now, I had a client that I coached, and she was a healthcare professional, and she actually loved her job. She was super, super good at it. But what she couldn't stop thinking about was how to make everything better, which really isn't a problem, but it became one. She thought about how patient care could be better, how the desk clerk could answer the phone better, how they could have a morning pre-shift huddle that would be better, how she herself could get more continuing education and certifications and do things that would make her position better. And that passion is totally beautiful and great and wonderful. But if you never turn it down and if it's always on volume 10, eventually you burn out. And that's what she did. She was exhausted. She frequently got ill. She wasn't able to perform like she wanted to because her brain wouldn't shut down when it's nighttime. And this is where we just need to turn down the dial. So, how do we work differently here? Is for intense perfectionists, the challenge isn't caring less because that's really hard. And I actually love caring. I think that's a great thing to do. But it's channeling that intensity strategically and using that energy for one thing or a few things instead of constantly with everything. Okay, so the next one is the Parisian perfectionist. And this one was actually the one that I related to the least. Their core trait is focused on relationships and being liked. They want harmony, they want approval, and their motto is if everybody is happy, then I am safe. Now, I traditionally have been, it's my way or the highway, and I don't really care what other people think. Although lately, I just took a Strength Finders quiz, and harmony was one of my core traits, this test said, which actually made me laugh because I don't think anyone from my nuclear family would say that harmony is one of my traits. However, I think as a mother, I have come to learn that when there is peace and harmony in the home, I do feel better. So I don't know. It just depends. I also have come a long way with practicing and believing the thought that I'm okay with people being wrong about me, but people pleasing has never been one of my initial responses. And people pleasing is really a freeze response and an invisible response and an avoidant response, which avoiding is not traditionally what I do. Anyway, with a Parisian perfectionist, these people are often people pleasers and it keeps them chronically out of alignment with their own needs. They're constantly looking to fulfill the needs of other people, to be liked, to avoid conflict, and they often overextend themselves emotionally and physically because they're always saying yes. They're always trying to be agreeable just to stay safe. Now, I had a client that I think fit this Parisian perfectionist, and she was kind of caught in this web of family drama. And I asked her, when you think of this, what is your thought? And she said, it is my responsibility to keep my family happy and content. And I told her, and how does that feel? And she said, very heavy. I said, yes, I can imagine, because no matter what you do, no matter what you say, somebody in your family is going to think you're doing it wrong. And you can't keep everybody happy. It's impossible to make the right choice that everybody supports. She was bending over backwards to keep relationships and extended family happy, and it just doesn't work. So the reframe for the Parisian perfectionist is that you need to remember that peace doesn't come from keeping everybody happy, but it comes from being your true authentic self. It comes from showing up the best that you know how and being okay with people being wrong about you or okay with people being disappointed with things that you do. The next is the procrastinator perfectionist. I also related to this one. The core trait is you want everything to be perfect before starting. So you could be paralyzed by fear of failure. And if they had a motto, it could be, if I can't do it right, I won't do it yet. So these people live with a constant low grade hum of anxiety and guilt for what is not done or what they need to do. And they have a high mental load of avoidance. And that drains energy more than the task itself, right? They just keep putting it off. I'm not ready yet. And the nervous system can toggle between freeze and fight, keeping them stuck. And I for sure can relate to this one, even just with starting my business, like choosing my branding colors and my pictures and what I should put on my website. And I want to change things. And even preparing for a podcast, I think, oh, I need to research more. I need to learn more. I need to read more. And that in itself can just burn you out from not trying. And I found that a reframe for this to work differently is healing comes from learning that progress is perfection and movement matters more than mastery. Being imperfect matters. Taking the action matters. It's never going to be perfect, which I don't even like to tell myself. I just realize that something is better than nothing, and that has helped. Okay, the last one is the messy perfectionist. So their core traits are they have big dreams, they have creative energy, they often start strong, but struggle to follow through. If they could have a motto, it's I have so many ideas, but I can't seem to make them all work. And I, again, could relate to this. I could do any job, I could do anything. I think about it all the time. I'm like, man, I'd be the best cashier at the grocery store. I would be the best sandwich maker at Subway. And I do have lots of ideas, and I would love to have 7 full-time lives. And one of them would be working labor and delivery full-time. And one of them would be traveling full-time. And one of them would be making podcasts full-time. And there's just so many things I want to do. And the frustration comes from feeling always behind. And this is when, again, the nervous system goes from hyper-focus or fight to crash and burn to freeze. And again, they have a strong inner critic and they judge themselves for being inconsistent, for being a starter and not a finisher. And I can totally relate to this of starting a lot of things and not finishing. Just the other day, actually, we were cleaning out a closet and there was a cross stitch quilt, a Thanksgiving quilt that I started when I was on bed rest with my oldest son, who is now 18. And I just wanted to throw it away. And my daughter said, no, 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 don't throw it away. You worked so hard on this. I'm like, I know. And I don't even know why. I don't like cross stitching. I don't even like sewing. But that's what I started on. And every time I see it, I think, ugh, I should finish that. So I just got rid of it. But for messy perfectionists, how do we work differently? Is our work actually isn't to finish everything. And that's totally fine. But we can honor the process and celebrate learning along the way. I actually did learn to cross stitch and sew. And I did learn to let my husband go and pick out the fabric for that thing. And there was a lot of learning that happened, but I was also okay to just let it go because I knew I wasn't going to finish it. And I had learned what I needed to in that project. Now, I want to come back to what I did with the reframe, because I really do believe that perfectionism is a gift and not a flaw. I really do believe that our weaknesses are our strengths that are overused. I really do believe that perfectionism and overachieving and high achieving, if that's what you want to call it, is really rooted in love and care and commitment and wanting to do a good job. It's a part of you that shows up fully, that you want to create something meaningful, you want to make a difference. And again, the problem isn't that you care, but it's when your care becomes control that's aimed at avoiding discomfort or shame, or it's driven by fear of other people's opinions or fear of what your inner critic might say. And I don't feel like we need to recover from perfectionism, but we need to teach it how to slow down. We need to see when it's helpful and when it's not. And when we can do this, our drive becomes sustainable, our nervous system becomes regulated, and our energy is protected. And how can we do that? Well, we can harness and tend to it by first getting curious and not critical. So we can ask ourselves, what is this part of me trying to protect? Or what core value is this part of me trying to show? Good questions to ask yourself. The second is reframing effort as devotion. And I've thought a lot about this. I was coaching a client just the other week, and she was telling me how she had gone above and beyond to care for her patients. And later she thought, oh, I shouldn't have done that. And her partners were saying, oh, you are caring too much, you're doing too much. And she was actually judging herself. Yeah, I shouldn't have done that. And I thought, but did you want to do that? Just because other people are telling you you're doing it wrong, I can see how you are going above and beyond to do your job and you're doing it well. And that is rooted in care and love. And that's why you're so good at what you do. But we just need to turn down the volume maybe a little bit so you don't burn out. And that gets into the next one, practicing surrender. So we can have the dial up in certain areas, but we turn down the areas that don't really matter. And I just had an experience with this the other weekend. My son was going to homecoming, and boys being boys, sometimes they don't plan. And he and a few other boys did not have corsages for their dates. And maybe their dates didn't want them, but we have a flower garden. So I said, well, why? Let's just make them bouquets. So I made a bouquet for his date. And one of the boys came over and made a bouquet for his date. And so I thought, well, if there's 7 boys, let's all make bouquets so every girl has one. So anyway, I spent the afternoon making bouquets. And I asked the boys, what color is your date's dress? And 2 of them said, oh, they're red. And so I used red flowers and whites and creams and stuff. And one of the boys came up to pick it up. And I said, okay, your date's dress is red, right? And he said, yes. And he said, yeah, I'll show you this picture. And he pulls up a picture and it's burgundy. Like, burgundy is not red. And he just laughed. And I could not let it go. So I made a whole other bouquet with burgundy flowers, not red. And I messaged his mom and I took pictures. I said, I know that T brought a red bouquet and this red is going to clash with her dress. And I'm bringing you a new bouquet so that it won't clash. Now, that boy did not care. I don't know that the mom cared. I don't have any idea if the girl cared, but I cared. And I actually did have time and it wasn't that big of a deal. So I made a new bouquet. It actually looked amazing. And I looked in the pictures and I just felt so good. I'm like, oh, that bouquet is so much better than the red one. And it matches her dress perfectly. It's totally spot on. And that was led by not fear of failure or fear of other people not caring, but I wanted to make a new bouquet. And I knew that pretty much nobody else cared except me. Now, if I were to do that all the time, I could get burned out. And so you can learn to surrender in areas that really don't matter. That for sure is one of them. Making a bouquet for my son's friend's date, who I wasn't even associated with, that's fine. But I wanted to. And I'm actually glad I did. But if I would have kept that up, it's almost impossible in your life. Okay, moving on. Number 4 is allowing excellence to coexist with ease. So ebbs and flow. Flow comes from being present and not tension. And you need to know when to pull, when to push, and just understand that you can excel in some areas and some areas not. And that brings us to our next part that I wanted to talk about is how can we learn to let go? How can we turn the dial down? How can we strategically work with our perfectionism in healthy ways? So, for example, like your work presentation might need precision, but your emails to your friends or your texts or your Facebook posts don't need perfection. Dinner can sometimes be a frozen pizza instead of a Pinterest masterpiece or a new recipe every night. Or not every meeting or project needs the personal touch. Not every carnival needs to look like you're at the Greatest Showman. And this comes through, again, practice, because our nervous system learns through practice. Our nervous system learns through experience. So every time you let go safely, you remind your nervous system, I'm safe even when things aren't perfect. I'm safe even when I'm not in control. I'm safe even when something is not as good as I would do it. And that is how we gain true freedom, is we are reminding our nervous system that we're safe and paying attention and pointing it out. So this week, you can try experimenting and pick one area and let it go. See if you feel relief, see if you feel discomfort, see if you feel fear. And it doesn't matter really what you feel, because both are signals that your nervous system is learning a new pattern. Both is helpful to learn how you can reframe. I did want to just talk briefly about Brené Brown. I really do love her work, and she does talk about how perfectionism can act as a shield and a way to protect ourselves from shame, criticism, or rejection. And I see this a lot with high achievers, that their drive can mask fear, like the fear of failing, the fear of not being good enough, the fear of not being at the top of the class, the fear of being mediocre, the fear of diagnosing something wrong, the fear of caring in a bad way, as if there is a bad way. And I want, again, to reiterate that the anecdote isn't giving up your drive. It's just learning to work differently. It's using courage and compassion and connection. It's learning to show up imperfectly. It's learning to speak kindly to yourself. It's learning to allow others to see you, the real authentic you, and being okay with that. So let's piece this all together and wrap up. So, in closing, perfectionism can be a gift. It fuels excellence, innovation, care. It really does drive people to change the world, and I love that. However, it is a two-edged sword, and it can become heavy when we use perfectionism as a shield to protect us from shame, criticism, or rejection, or when we try to control everything outside of us. When we can learn to let go or learn to turn the volume down in select areas, when we can practice compassion with ourselves, when we can notice the nervous system cues that our body's giving us, when we can learn to stay regulated, that is when we can show up more authentically. And then again, each type of perfectionist has strengths and patterns, and we honor those, but we just adjust and reframe to prevent stress and burnout. So just a few questions to end that you can journal or think about. So where does my perfectionism help me shine? Because I absolutely know that it does. Where is my perfectionism a shield or a weight or the two-edged sword that I'm carrying unnecessarily? And what is one area I can safely let go of this week? So there's some questions for you. So thank you for listening today. I really do believe that perfectionists aren't broken, and that those parts of you are what make you brilliant and awesome and really do help you shine. And it can be a two-edged sword and can prevent you from resting and can prevent you from completing the stress cycle and can lead to burnout. The real gift is learning to hold on to your perfectionism, but hold on to it lightly and let it serve you without letting it consume you. Remember, tend to your fire and don't let it burn you out, and don't let it be too dim. So if today's episode resonated with you, I'd love to hear about it. Just email me or reach out. And just remember that change comes when we retrain our brain and nervous system to work for us, not against us. When we teach it to not work harder, but work differently. And that is the work that I help people do in my coaching. So if you're ready to explore what that looks like for you, I have a few one-on-one spots open. Just reach out to me on my website. And thanks for being here. And I'll talk to you next time. Every week, you're learning something new here on this podcast, and that is a powerful first step. But guess what? Information alone doesn't create transformation. True change happens when you start to think differently and shift the nervous system patterns that drive your behavior. As a coach and an emotional resiliency expert, that is the work I do. I love to walk alongside you, whether it's one-on-one, in a small group that you choose, or with your workplace team. I can help you retrain your brain and nervous system so that stress no longer runs the show. You'll find ways to connect with me in the show notes. Let's do this work together.